Hi, and welcome to this first week of distance learning with our altered curriculum and what we're looking at over the next couple of weeks, which is the idea of illustrative-based work or drawing within limitations. For this first lesson, you will need at least one sheet of A4 paper. You're going to need a sharp pencil with an eraser, unless you're more comfortable working with pen, in which case, or more comfortable working with ink, in which case you can use a pen. And if you're going to try and attempt our challenge mode today, which is your method of getting yourself some house points, you are going to need some colour pencils or markers. As some of you will know, I am a humongous Pokemon fan, and during the spring break, I found this work by Michael Furman on Instagram, also known as Michael Furman Art. I really liked the simplicity of the design. I liked how the characters of each of the Pokemon came out really clearly. But the thing that I like most is how he kind of self-contained each of the sprites or the images that he created within like a geometric shape. And most of the designs were quite confined within that area. You might find some pieces coming out, say for example, like the top of some hair or some smoke or some ears or some wings, but generally everything was self-contained within that geometric shape area. And it got me thinking about a few things that can be motivating when trying to draw, because generally if you say, okay, we're going to practice drawing, you can draw anything you like, it can be quite difficult to get started. Whereas if you impose some limitations upon yourself, it can be better because you force yourself to be more creative within those limitations, and it gives you at least some rules that you have to follow. Generally, with Michael Furman's work, I also really like the colour and the vibrancy today, which inspired today's challenge mode to try and add colour or tone to the work. Generally looking at his work through Instagram, there's an exaggerated style across most of what he's doing. He generally tends to take quite organic features and break them down into geometric based shapes. So we can see on here, we've got a couple of different designs. We've got Toad in the middle, who's not necessarily like very angular and blocky, but is very exaggerated in the style with like the expressions, with his eyebrows, with the big kind of toad bit on top. For the K-pop cat and the singer from K-pop Demon Hunters, you've again got quite an exaggerated feature. You've got like these derpy kind of eyes looking in different directions, but you've got quite blocky areas as well. And within the Predator on the other side, again, it's less kind of realistic, but very, very exaggerated, very, very geometric. It kind of got me thinking about how you could apply the idea of limitations working within a certain area to different types of animals or creatures or characters in a similar way to how Furman did his Pokemon work. And it felt like within looking at some of these, it reminded me of some of the totem pole designs that we looked at last year. So if you were with us last year, you might remember some kind of quite blocky totem pole designs. Generally, they're the same. They are kind of confined to a geometric based area. There are some rules you have to follow. You have to try and reduce any negative space, which is any empty areas around it. And you need the animal to maintain a strong sense of style or character, even working within a relatively small area. So they kind of broke down to some limitations that I wanted to try to impose upon myself when practicing drawing, or try to impose upon you when I get you to do some drawing practice, to try and create work inspired by Michael Furman, inspired by those totem poles with creatures or animals. So our learning objective for today is to create designs with imposed limitations. So we're going to force ourselves to try to follow 3 rules within some drawing that we're going to do. We're going to do a starter activity where we're going to basically copy a design which has these 3 limitations imposed. And then the bigger part of today's lesson is going to be you trying to follow these 3 rules with a creature or character. So limitation 1, geometric boundary for as much of the design as possible. So you're going to start with any kind of shape like circle, sphere, rectangle, square, and you're going to try to use that as the main area for where the design is going to go. Limitation number 2 is going to be that the design needs to be simplistic but clear. So if you are creating, if I scroll back for a second, if I'm looking at the whale is very simplistic, like you've only got the main exaggerated features, the tail, the fin, the mouth, kind of like those details you get on the bottom of a whale, but it's very clear to see what it actually is. And limitation 3 is that there needs to be minimal negative space within the boundary. Now, let's look at these fish for our first example. Does it follow limitation 1? Well, we've got a triangle, a circle, and a square, And all three of these fish follow that idea of maintaining a geometric boundary for much of the design, which most of the design does not escape from. If I look at the triangle one, I can see the fin, the tail, and the top fin on top kind of goes outside that area. Same for the second, same for the third, but generally that design is confined within that space. Limitation 2, simplistic. It is very simplistic. We've got some scales on the fish, but not too many. We've got a big exaggerated feature like an eye, a mouth, an eyebrow. And limitation 3, minimal negative space within the boundary. So there's only small areas that haven't been utilized within that geometric shape that have been put together. Slightly more challenging ones now. So we've got some kind of goat-like creature for our top one. We've got a really cool looking T-Rex, and down the bottom, I guess that's like an ogre or a goblin with wings, I'm not sure. Something fantastical, something not quite realistic. So again, starting point, geometric boundary for much of the design. So the sheep kind of like creature uses a triangular form, which it almost entirely remains within, except for the horns on the top. The square for the T-Rex works really, really well, and the circle for whatever we're calling that creature on the bottom. The design is simplistic, however, it starts to gain more character the more detail that gets added within it, but I wouldn't say it crosses the boundary of being overly complex. And limitation 3, minimal negative space, and I think that's pretty true. The T-Rex is the one which has the largest area of negative space, which isn't utilized, which is like between that jaw and the tail area, but it kind of allows then the jaw to really stand out. And if I go back to Furman's work, which we looked at in the beginning, some of this is true, and this is the inspiration for most of this. So generally, the geometric shape is where the Pokemon is within. There is, for most designs, minimal negative space, and he's kind of taken the main elements of the characters and like amplified them somewhat to make it a simplistic design, but it maintains the character. So your starter for today, and I'm going to want you to spend 5 minutes on this, is to try to follow that step for the triangle, the circle, and the square fish. And I want you to try to create that as you go. I want you to try and follow the steps as you go. If you are more confident or comfortable with your drawing, you can add more features. You can change it from being like a fish into a shark, but I want you to stay aquatic with the first starter task here. 5 minutes, so put a 5-minute timer on, that's what I want to work through. After you have done that, the main part of today's lesson is using either one of these designs, or if you go to the last slide on the PowerPoint I shared, there's a whole host of different animals, creatures, characters you can utilize, or your own research. I want you to try and create something which follows those limitations, but inspired by something you've seen or by one of the more complex ones here, where it's the sheep, the T-Rex, or the ogre goblin thing on the bottom. So using one of the 3 more challenging ideas or one of your own, create an animal or a creature design with the imposed limitations, and that's the big thing for today. Your challenge mode is to apply color or tone, and if you want it to be within Furman's style, they're going to be quite bright or vibrant tones within that work. And again, that final slide has a whole host of different examples for you to look at as you are working within those imposed limitations. I really can't wait to see what work you put together with this for this week. And I look forward to giving you guys some feedback on it. All the best. If during the lesson you do have any questions, whether you are with myself or Mr. Ali, please make sure that you are utilizing the chat function to ask those questions. And I really can't wait to see what you guys put together. And I'll see you next week.